Back to today's video. Today is Sunday, April 5th, 2020, and funny story, I told you guys that I broke my computer a couple days ago, and funny thing is, it got worse last night. I made a 2020 Senate video, which is the same one I'm doing right now, and it was at, I think, 70% upload, and then all of a sudden my computer just went haywire. It disconnected from the AirPlay, and all around was extremely hard to work again. So it's going to go into this Apple repair store hopefully tomorrow. It's the only time I'm leaving my house. Unfortunately, I have to do this because I am now on my old MacBook computer. My voice definitely is going to sound different, and I don't have necessarily the requirements for doing my election night video that I had planned to do. This computer is so much older, so it's going to be really hard to work with, I guess, a machine like this compared to the one that I'm used to. But I guess so. Today I'm going to be redoing my 2020 Senate election prediction. The reason why I'm doing a Senate election prediction is because at the beginning of every month in the state, in the year 2018, I did one up until the 2018 Senate elections, of course, the midterm elections. So I'm deciding to do that now. So at the beginning of every month, it should have been April 4th, but today is April 5th, and I will be completing my my map for essentially the month of April for the 2020 Senate election. So these are as the elections are held today. These are not speculative as to what will happen with the coronavirus, the economy, etc. as we hit November. This is purely if the election was held today. And let's just go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and lock the map. Hopefully everything works. This is actually my first time on this website using this computer, so it was pretty interesting seeing a different, I guess, background than what I'm used to. But let's go ahead and fill in the, I guess, safe states for the GOP. That includes Idaho, Wyoming, South Dakota, Nebraska. You can see the lag in literally just the map, which is pretty interesting. Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Tennessee, West Virginia, and South Carolina. So these states are all considered safe states, or these were considered safe states in my previous prediction. I'm actually going to go ahead and move South Carolina into the likely column, but this is the only move in terms of my overall safe ratings for characterizations. Pretty much the rest are going to remain the same. South Carolina is the only one moving into the likely column. So what changed? Well, Jamie Harrison hasn't ever really had a quote-unquote a chance at this seat. Lindsey Graham is popular. He's a well-known figure nationwide. No reason as to why he would lose this election. But I do think with increased turnout that we're likely going to see as we hit 2020, the 2018 midterms rivaled presidential turnout in the 2000s to 2010s, I think South Carolina will actually be less than 15% in terms of the Senate and the presidential election. It's not going to be competitive, but it's still not going to be safe. That's not necessarily a warning sign for the GOP, but just a little bit of a showing that African-American turnout is going to be a lot higher. And as a result, I do think that South Carolina will now be a likely state instead of a safe state. But that puts the Republicans at 41 seats. Let's talk about safe seats for the Democrats. That includes Illinois, New Mexico, Oregon, New Jersey, Delaware, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Virginia. Now, some of you guys may not agree with that Virginia and New Mexico characterization, but I want you to honestly think about these states in particular. They have a strong Democratic history in the presidential elections and in midterms in 2018, and they narrowly, I guess, wavered in 2014, but they still ended up in the Democratic column. These are two states that have a strong history of going for the Democrats, and even in a Republican year, even if Trump is to win the presidency, I do think that these states will stay in the Democratic column. But right now, I'm counting on increased turnout that I think would happen if the election was held today. And I do think that these candidates, especially with an incumbent in Virginia, there is a retiring incumbent in New Mexico, but it's still going to be a Democratic hold. Honestly, I'm comfortable enough putting these in the safe Democratic column. Let's go ahead and talk about some of these likely states. So we already have South Carolina filled in. Might as well go over to the state of Georgia and characterize that entire, not necessarily entire, this statewide race that was pre-planned to be held in 2020, not the special election, is going to be a likely seat. And when we think about Georgia, it does have, I guess in the presidential election, it used to be a Republican state completely. There was no really chance for the Democrats to ever win either statewide in Senate, governor, or House elections in some of those competitive districts that are competitive now. Georgia 6th, Georgia 7th. But now on a statewide level, we have a Senate race. We have John Ossoff, who ran for the 6th district in 2018. It was a very, I guess, competitive special election. The Republicans ended up winning it, but then they ended up losing it in the midterm election season. But Georgia, I think, will be a likely Republican state on the, I guess, statewide level with an incumbent. The special election is another story, so we're going to go ahead and hit that one after. Mississippi, we don't necessarily have an unpopular incumbent, but we do have someone who was recently elected and did have a, I think, 8-point margin last election. So I do think that this one will be a likely Republican seat. As for Mitch McConnell, he's running against Amy McGrath. I think she could give him a run for his money, but honestly, realistically, Kentucky is still a likely state. Regardless of how close she comes to the Senate election, they aren't voting out Mitch McConnell. Unless something rapidly changes with Mitch McConnell's constituency and their personal political beliefs, they're Republicans at heart, and although Mitch McConnell may be the second most disapproved of senator nationwide, I don't think that it's enough to move the state of Illinois. Sorry, why did I say the state of Illinois? The state of Kentucky into even lean Republican, because at this point, I think that Kentucky will still be a Republican seat. And if you look at 2014, he ran against probably a more formidable opponent than Amy McGrath and won by an astonishing margin, despite his approval rating still being in the low 30s. So that puts the Republicans at 44, the Democrats at 43. Let's talk about some other likely GOP states. That is Kansas and Texas. To be honest, these are two states that nobody really expected to be super competitive. We have a popular incumbent in Texas, and then a retiring one in Kansas, but still going to be a Republican seat. Though 2018 was definitely a good look for Democrats in both Kansas and Texas, we don't have any really notable Democrats running in Texas. No one that can really run up the numbers. And in Kansas, honestly, the Democrats aren't going to do well here in a presidential election year. A midterm year is definitely different because any vote for anyone that isn't a Republican is a message against the president. But moving into a presidential election year, the stakes are definitely higher, and a lot of people are going to be voting down ballot. So I would actually consider Kansas a likely GOP state. Moving over into the likely Democratic states. There aren't that many. The first one is the state of New Hampshire. This one I would consider to be a likely Democratic state, though New Hampshire does have a tendency of being, I guess, a toss-up seat in terms of any type of election. Not so much governor election, though, this time, but in the presidential elections and Senate elections, I think that New Hampshire will actually end up being a likely Democratic seat in 2020, especially with, I think that one would be a likely Democratic seat state on the presidential level as well. Colorado is definitely voting Cory Gardner out. We have an incumbent who's not popular whatsoever, was elected in a Republican wave year, votes against the beliefs of his constituency time and time again, sides with the president more than a number of other Republicans in safer red states. He's out. Period. That's literally it. You have a popular governor going in. John Hickenlooper ran for president in 2020, now running for Senate. Honestly, Cory Gardner does not stand a chance, which is why I'm saying that this is not the only flip. This is the flip that I'm characterizing as a likely flip. I wouldn't do that for any other of these, I guess, flipped races because of the fact that that's not going to happen other than in the state of Colorado. In Minnesota, this is another state I would characterize as likely. Honestly, not too much to worry about for the Democrats here. Tina Smith was elected in 2018. She will win a full term here, no doubt. Moving, I guess, ahead, we need to focus on some of these lean states. There are some tilt states that we will go ahead and cover, I guess, later. But let's go ahead and look at the Republican states first because they do have a pathway to the majority through their lean states. So the first one being North Carolina. This is a Republican state at heart, has a Republican identity. It probably will end up going for Donald Trump, though a lot of you guys do think that this one is a sleeper state. I 100% agree, but I'm going to go ahead and say that Donald Trump does win the state of North Carolina on both the presidential level and the Republicans win it in the Senate level. North Carolina just has a strong history of being a Republican state, sending representatives to the Senate and the House being Republicans as well. Honestly, I'm not seeing it too much for the Democrats, but if they do end up winning here, it will number one, prove this prediction wrong, but it definitely could change by the time we hit Election Day. But I'm going to go ahead and say North Carolina goes to the Republican Party. This is another flip, but in favor of the GOP. Alabama. I'm saying this one goes lean for the GOP. Doug Jones, while he may be mildly popular for a Democrat in Alabama, he probably won't win re-election. Unless, I guess, the best case scenario, like what happened in 2017, happens for him, he's not going to win re-election. We're talking about him running against either Jeff Sessions or Tommy Tuberville. I'm pretty sure that's how you pronounce it, former football coach in the state of Alabama. So, Alabama, I think, will be a flip. I think it will be a lean GOP state, though. I still think that the margin will be close, but on the presidential level, absolutely a blowout for President Trump. For Iowa, Joni Ernst is actually the third most disapproved of senator nationwide. Surprise, surprise. I don't say that sarcastically. I honestly didn't know that up until yesterday. But Iowa, still, I think that Iowa will be a Republican state on the presidential level. When we talk about the Senate elections, it typically fares better for the GOP, despite some other states proving otherwise. But Iowa, I do think, will go to the GOP. Joni Ernst, when she was first elected, she seemed to offer a different type of voice to Washington. She seemed to be someone who was big behind, I guess, draining the swamp. And that is the same type of person they elected in 2016. And that is the same person that I do believe they will vote for in 2020 and also on the Senate race. Honestly, not seeing it for Democrats in Iowa. It is possible, which is why it's in the lean column, but it is not the favorite to happen right now. So let's go ahead and take a look at, we do have, I guess, two more. Not two more, sorry. The state of Georgia right now. I'm going to go ahead and characterize the special election as lean. Honestly, don't see the Democrats winning it. They don't necessarily have the best candidates in either of those two races. So, honestly, they actually gave up a really good chance that they could have had two Democratic senators from Georgia. But even with super, I guess, high turnout, it would be a stretch for the Democrats to carry Georgia. But let's go ahead and talk about some of these lean Democratic states and then talk about these tilt Democratic states as well. So Michigan, this is a state that I believe will be lean. All of the recent polls, not just the polls, but all of the recent polls, even ones conducted by Republicans, show Gary Peters ahead. And that's not bad for him whatsoever. Even though the margin may seem like +2, it's a Republican pollster, so in reality, it's probably +6, +8. And just the compilation of all the recent data that we have, the 2018 midterms, the 2016 election, midterms in both the House and the Senate, and the governorship, which flipped from red to blue, by the way. And then moving ahead with demographics and increased turnout amongst minority voters, especially in that Detroit area, is going to make all the difference. I think Michigan's going to go to the Democrats. John James lost in 2018. I do think that he's going to lose again in 2020. Gary Peters seems like he is a do-nothing senator at some point because his name isn't mentioned too much, but I honestly do not think that the people of Michigan see it that way. And he's faced competitive re-election years before, 2014, the most notable one. But I do think that the Democrat incumbent will hold off in the state of Michigan. As for Arizona, I think this one will also be a lean Democratic state. These voters have rejected Martha McSally before, and I don't see why 2 years would change it. Even with President Trump on the ballot, I do believe that Joe Biden, if he is the nominee, will be very competitive in Arizona, and right now is my current favorite to win the state itself. And then the Senate election as well. Again, we have Mark Kelly. He offers a centrist appeal to the same voters that elected Kyrsten Sinema. They love centrists here. And honestly, that's the winning candidate for states like Arizona. And Martha McSally, I mean, I don't know why they would have appointed someone who just lost a Senate race. It's just saying practically screw you to the voters. But Arizona, I'm going to say, is a lean Democratic state at this point. This is a flip from red to blue. So the Democrats have a net gain of 1 right now. The Republicans are at 50. This leaves 2 races, Montana and Maine. So let's talk about Montana. Montana I'm characterizing as a tilt GOP state. I'm not going to say this one is going to be extremely focused on. We have Governor Steve Bullock, who dropped out of the presidential race and now is running a Senate race despite saying he would not run for the United States Senate. And I do think that it is pretty interesting. Montana has a very weird dynamic where they're known for voting for Republicans on the presidential level, but in statewide races, I mean, it's a toss-up as to who they vote for. The House election was contested in 2018. The Senate election was contested. And it looks like the governor election is contested as well this time around. So it is possible the Democrats end up winning all 3 or end up losing all 3. But the interesting thing about Montana's Senate election is that we do have an incumbent Republican running against a popular incumbent Democrat. I think this one will still end up being a tilt GOP state, but my previous characterization was lean Dem. But with Trump's increasing approval rating nationwide, I think that is the narrow nudge that the Republicans needed to hold on to Montana. But I do think that the Democrats definitely are going to get a nudge in the state of Maine with a tilt flip. Now, I know it seems crazy, but Susan Collins is now the most unapproved or disapproved of senator nationwide. It's not Mitch McConnell. It's Susan Collins, who previously was winning elections by, 30 points. And despite her being insanely popular before, she's now at a 52% disapproval rating, 42% approval rating. Granted, her approval rating is higher than Mitch McConnell's, but the disapproval rating is definitely higher. And Maine is not exactly a Republican state. You can't fall back and say it's a Republican state, so it's going to go to Susan Collins. Honestly, I think the Democrats might actually carry this one, but very narrowly at this point. So this gives the Democrats a net 2 gain. Honestly, things are definitely going to change back and forth as we proceed and as things change with the whole coronavirus situation. I hope you guys are all staying safe. Hopefully tomorrow goes good and I'll have a clear date as to when I can get my computer back and everything back up and running. But again, stay safe, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below, and I'll see you all tomorrow.